The platform went quiet the moment she stepped down from the iron horse. Dust swirled around her hem as the train hissed to a stop, steam curling like a ghost across the evening sun. Men who'd been leaning back against crates with whiskey bottles paused mid-swig. Cards stilled in rough hands, the kind of hush that only happened in a town where everyone thought they'd seen everything, until now. Elias Hart felt the silence more than he heard it. He was leaning against the telegraph pole at the far end of the station, Stetson tipped low, pretending to be invisible. For years, he had been the butt of the town's cruelest joke, the ranch hand who'd never kissed a woman, the man who turned scarlet whenever a saloon girl winked. Boys jeered, old men sneered, and women pitied. He swallowed the shame like dust, letting it pile inside until he barely spoke at all. But when his eyes found hers, Zeitfern, Dials, and he'd muff. She wasn't like the painted saloon girls or the hard-eyed widows of Ridgetown. She carried herself like someone who'd crossed oceans, her trunk in one hand, her gloved fingers steady, her gaze sharp as broken glass and yet filled with something he hadn't seen in years, softness. Her dark hair was pinned beneath a traveling hat, her lips pressed tight, as though she was bracing against the whole world. The sheriff was the first to break the spell. Stepping fifth was the first to break the spell. Stepping fifth, "No, Sheriff, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." Her voice was low, threaded with exhaustion, but it carried across the platform like a church bell. Elias didn't mean to move, but his boots betrayed him. One step forward, then another. His throat burned as the whispers started around him, the jeering low and ugly. Hearts staring again. Poor fool wouldn't know what to do if she smiled at him. The woman's gaze lifted, sweeping across the platform. For a heartbeat, Elias forgot to breathe. She didn't look away. In fact, the faintest curve tugged at her lips, not mockery, but recognition, as if she'd been searching for him. A freight door slammed at the end of the train. Rough boots hit the ground. 3 men in dust-dark coats stepped off, their eyes cutting straight to her. And the hush on the platform turned into something else entirely. Fear. Elias realized the woman stepping off the train hadn't come alone, and whatever she carried, others were willing to kill for. The men moved like wolves, slow, circling, confident in their prey. One of them, tall with a crooked hat, touched the brim toward her mockingly. "Evening, miss. Train ride treat you fair?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't answer. She gripped her trunk tighter. The sheriff shifted uneasily. "These fellas with you?" Her silent, Schellembliers. Her silent Vilm Hilholm silent. The answer, clear as daylight, was no. Elias's pulse thudded. He'd seen men like that before, range riders who'd kill for gold or blood feuds alike. The kind of men who laughed at laws. If she was theirs, it wasn't by choice. One of them caught Elias watching. A grin split his scarred face. "Well, looky here. Ain't that Hart? Town's bashful little lamb." He spat, eyes mean. "Still blushin' when a woman looks your way?" Laughter rippled cruelly across her way. Elias's face burned, but he didn't drop his gaze this time. He looked at the woman, steady, unflinching. She gave the smallest shake of her head, as if warning him, "Don't step in. Don't be a fool." But fool or not, Elias's boots moved again. He cleared his throat. "Sheriff," he said, voice rough, "maybe the lady needs escortin' dot." The sheriff blinked, surprised at the sound of Elias speaking up. The riders didn't. Their eyes sharpened. The tall one leaned closer to the woman, his hand brushing her trunk. "What's in here that's worth running across half the territory for?" She jerked the trunk back, lips parting, ready to speak, then cut herself off. Her gaze flicked once more to Elias, almost pleading now. A choice split before him, as sharp as the switch on a rail line. He could keep his head down like always, let the riders drag her off, and go home to his silence. Or he could step forward, mocked man, unwanted, untested, and put his life between her and the wolves. The platform air grew tight, whispers snaking through the crowd. Everyone waited. Elias swallowed, his throat raw. "I'll walk her," he said finally. The riders stilled, disbelief flashing into menace. The sheriff stiffened. The woman's lips parted in a silent gasp. Then the tall man laughed, low and dangerous. "Boy," he said, voice dripping with contempt, "you just made the worst mistake of your short, lonely life." The crowd flinched as the rider's hand drifted toward his revolver. The scrape of leather against iron was enough to spark panic. The sheriff's hand hovered over his holster but never moved. No one in town trusted him to stand against wolves. The crowd edged back, leaving Elias exposed in the center of the platform. The woman grazed and grid. Elias felt his hard hammer against his ribs, each beat screaming at him to run. But something stronger than fear kept his boots planted. The tall rider drew his revolver halfway when a train whistle shrieked down the line, splitting the tension. Lantern light flickered across steel, across sweat-beaded brows. Elias spoke, his voice low but carrying, "She's not yours." The laughter died from the man's face. Silence stretched so thin it felt like it would do. Then the revolver lifted, aimed square at Elias's chest. The woman cried out, stepping forward. "Don't!" The riders glanced at her, distracted for a precious second, and Elias moved. Not with skill, not with training, just with desperation. He lunged, slamming into the tall man before the gun could fire. They crashed to the planks, revolver skidding across the wood. Chaos erupted. The other riders surged forward, fists and boots flying, flying. Townsfolk scattered, screaming. Elias fought clumsily, wild and furious. A punch split his lip, another rattled his jaw. He tasted blood, spat it, and kept swinging. He wasn't fighting for pride anymore. He was fighting because if he let go, she was gone. The woman snatched up a fallen lantern and hurled it. It shattered against the rider's back, flames licking his coat. He cursed, flailing, giving Elias just enough space to scramble up. "The dears, Elias, you're dead, boy," he hissed, yanking a knife from his belt. Elias staggered back, chest heaving. Around him, the platform was a blur of smoke, shouting, fire. The woman's voice cut through it all, "Run." But he couldn't, not with the knife glinting inches from his throat. The blade flashed, and the fight turned deadly. The knife slash grazing Elias's shoulder. He cried out, stumbling. The rider pressed forward, rage twisting his face. And then, step form, the tall rider froze, eyes wide, before crumpling forward. Behind him stood the woman, pistol in her shaking hand. Her chest rose and fell like she'd fired not one shot, but 100. Elias stared at her, stunned. She had killed to save him. For a long moment, the platform was chaos around them, smoke, shouts, fleeing riders, but inside that circle of silence, it was only the two of them. She lowered the pistol slowly, her hand downwards. "You hurt?" she whispered, eyes flicking to his bleeding shoulder. "I'll live," he muttered. She looked at him fully then, the hardness in her gaze cracking just enough to reveal the weight she carried. "They'll come again. They won't stop until they have what's mine." "What is it?" Elias asked. Her lips pressed tight, then she crouched by the fallen trunk. With a trembling hand, she opened it. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were papers, official-looking, stamped. "My brother was cheated out of our ranch," she said. "These prove it's ours. But the men who took it won't let the truth live." Elias looked at her, at the trunk, then back at her. He had no stake in this feud, no reason to bleed for it, except the fire he felt in his chest when she met his eyes. "They'll be coming," she said softly. "And I've got no one." Elias exhaled, blood dripping down his arm, the jeers of the past echoing in air. But tonight, he'd stood. Tonight, he'd been something else. "You've got me," he said simply. Her lips trembled, caught between disbelief and relief. She touched his cheek, tentative, gentle. The first touch of kindness he'd felt in years. Outside, the last of the riders fled into the night, but their threats lingered like smoke. The platform smelled of blood and ash. The woman leaned close, whispering her name, Clara. And in that moment, as their foreheads touched, Elias knew the fight wasn't over. It was only beginning. They left the platform under cover of darkness, Clara clutching her trunk, Elias limping beside her. The sheriff offered no help, only a muttered warning, "Those men won't stop." Elias already knew. They hid the night in an abandoned shack beyond the river. Elias's shoulder burned, his lips swollen, but when Clara pressed a strip of claw, he felt her hand, steady despite all she'd endured. "They'll come for me again," she whispered. "They'll come for us," Elias corrected, and for once he didn't falter on the word. By dawn, riders appeared on the horizon. Dust trails thickened. Clara's papers meant land, meant power. The wolves would not relent. Elias stood outside the shack, shotgun in hand, knowing the fight might be his last. But the weight of fear had shifted. He wasn't the Sifton. He was a man standing for someone who believed in him. The riders charged. Gunfire cracked across the field. Elias fired back, steady, his aim truer than he'd ever known. Clara loaded beside him, her resolve hard as iron. Together they held. The wolves fell one by one until the survivors scattered, their courage broken. Silence followed, heavy and unreal. Smoke drifted over the field, broken only by Clara's sob of relief. Elias dropped the shotgun, chest heaving, and turned to her. She threw her arms around him, fierce, unashamed. The town would talk for years about the night the quiet ranch hand stood against killers, about the woman who stepped off the train carrying truth and fire. But for Elias, none of it mattered. What mattered was the way she looked at him now, not as a joke, not as a boy, but as the man who had chosen her over fear. Weeks later, with her he did. Together they rebuilt the land, and in time the jeers of the past were replaced with respect. Years later, children would gather at their table, listening to Clara tell the story of the night she met Elias Hart, the man mocked for never kissing a woman, until the day she stepped off the train and gave him a reason to never look away. Final shot, a rocking chair creaks on a wide ranch porch, Elias's hat hanging from the rail, Clara's hand hanging from the rail. Clara's hand?